High turnout and, as expected, a pretty close race. Georgia's most recent election saw Senator Raphael Warnock with a full 6-year term by defeating Herschel Walker. So we have a lot to talk about with Chuck Todd, moderator of NBC's Meet the Press and the network's political director. So Chuck, I know you and your fellow election watchers at NBC News have crunched the numbers at this point. Ultimately, why did Raphael Warnock win this race?
Because a bunch of never Trump Republicans and independent voters couldn't bring themselves to support Herschel Walker. When you look at that November result and you see all of the other statewide Republicans and what they got and how they avoided runoffs and how they won with more than 50% of the vote, and then you look at what Herschel Walker did. First of all, you have to credit Raphael Warnock's campaign for reaching out, trying to win over, because what was interesting here is look, turnout was good for Warnock in some of these key African-American precincts, but it wasn't overwhelming. What he performed pretty strongly in some of these exurban counties. He's overperformed what a Democrat does, which means he was winning over basically the never Trumpers, right? It's a small 3 to 5 to 7% of the Republican electorate, but they voted for Brian Kemp, and they voted for most of that Republican ticket. So ultimately, I'll tell you what it's done for me, for what it's worth, is I don't view Georgia as a pure swing state going into 2024. I think the results in 2022 show us Georgia's an anti-Trump state. Donald Trump cannot carry the state of Georgia, but another Republican could. And if it's another Republican, I think Georgia is one of those states that Democrats will come up short on, especially because Joe Biden won't have Raphael Warnock on the ballot with him in 24 like he did in 2020. And I think in hindsight, that turned out to be a pretty big asset.
Yeah, we definitely saw the gap between Kemp votes and Walker votes, so that makes sense. I know on Sunday you'll be talking with Senator Jon Tester, a Democrat from Montana, and the big picture in the Senate. Right. As of election night, we had 41-59 in favor of the Democrats and the independents who caucus with them. Now there was a surprise announcement today by Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema that she's now leaving the Democratic Party, registering as independent. So how do you imagine this could change things for the Senate, the Democrats, maybe even beyond that?
Well, it doesn't change anything technically. Instead of 2 independents that caucus with the Democrats, we now have 3 independents, because she is still siding with the Democrats as far as organizing the Senate is concerned. And why does that matter? That means it's not a 50-50 tiebreaker business. It means the committees aren't evenly split. This is a 51-49 Senate as far as the organizing is concerned. So it means Democrats have a 1-vote advantage on every committee. During the most recent Senate, when it was 50-50, even with the tiebreaker, on the committee level, it was evenly split. So you would have many things not be able to get out of committee. So in that sense. But what I do think I'm going to boil it down this way. If Kyrsten Sinema successfully wins re-election by bypassing the Democratic primary process, I think this could become something that's a bit more contagious with a lot of other soft partisan senators, right? There's a lot of senators who are uncomfortable with the rigidity of the 2 parties. But most of them, because of how hard it is to raise money, if you're not inside one of the 2 parties, they don't want to do it. But if Sinema, and I think Arizona is one of these few places where this is a very doable thing, if she pulls this off, I think that it's possible that going forward, maybe we see an independent caucus that is anywhere from 6 to 8 senators that, if they act together, could end up moderating one or both of the leaderships of both parties.
And Chuck, I want to go back before we go to what you said about Georgians seemingly wanting to kind of distance themselves from Trump-affiliated candidates. As we start to look towards 2024, I think Republicans are probably facing some tough choices. I mean, how do they resolve this?
It's a great question, right? And it's tough to resolve if Donald Trump doesn't accept the premise. And he doesn't accept the premise that he's more of a problem than a solution. And I think we're going to find out throughout this primary process. One of the things we noticed in 2022, which brings me back even to the Sinema story, in any battleground state, meaning places like Georgia and Wisconsin, and where there were contested primaries, the party with the contested primary got hurt more in the general. We saw it in Pennsylvania. We saw it in Michigan governor. We saw it in Arizona Senate and Arizona governor on the Republican side. And Democrats have avoided really hard-charging primaries. Warnock's never really had a real primary. He was, even the first time he ran, he never really got that contentious. Kirsten Sinema didn't have a real serious primary the first time in Arizona. No to Mark Kelly, none of the Nevada senators, none of the Michigan Democratic senators. So it is, that to me has been a problem for the Republicans. And as long as sort of this Trump wing is there and some people think, well, I can fast track to the nomination, I think now we realize in states that are battleground states, the Trump brand turns off the middle. We saw it in New Hampshire as well. So that's something that's got to work itself out. And until the party figures out what to do with the Trump wing, I think this is one that keeps them in disarray for some time.
Yeah, we can learn a lot from these elections, certainly a lot more than just winners and losers. Thank you, Chuck. Meet the Press with Senator John Tester and other guests airs Sunday morning at 10 on 11 Alive. Thanks so much.